Perfect. Thank you. All right. Now we're
You
good.
bet.
Okay. So our agenda this afternoon, we're going to talk about why provide great guest service. Why is it important? Because, you know, your people may ask you and say, well, you know, what's the big deal? Why is this so important? So hopefully as leaders, you'll be able to answer that question for them. How do I become a great guest service leader? As you'll see, it all starts with leadership. And your leadership is going to determine the level of service that you provide in your organization. What is great guest service? We're going to go over, and frankly, there are 4 things that if you consistently can provide, you will provide great guest service that far surpasses anyone else out there. How can I evaluate guest service? I'm going to teach you a method where any experience that you have, whether it be at a restaurant, a hotel, airline, your own company, you can evaluate that guest service on each different level. How do I create it? So we've talked about why it's important, how to lead it, what it is, but then how do you actually create this? And I'm going to give you some of the tips and tricks that Disney has used over the years. Now, I know in this next point, you know, you all never have any irate customers, but in the chance that you might, I'm going to go over the last chance model and tell you a way that you can take a harsh critic and turn them into a raving fan. As I said, we'll have some questions and then a video and a conclusion at the end. So as I mentioned in the introduction, providing hospitality and being a guest service leader is actually a biblical requirement for leaders. If you look in Titus 1, you see the requirements for a leader in the church. And it says, since an overseer is entrusted with God's work, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. Now, notice in the first part of that verse, you have 6 nots. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. All right, sorry, 5 nots. And then you have 6 things you should do. And the first is to be hospitable. Now, think about that for a minute. You know, God's word is carefully written and is directly from him. And so the order of these things is very important. And the first thing after all these knots is be hospitable. Before being upright, holy, disciplined, self-controlled. What's that all about? I mean, would anyone have expected that to be a requirement for a leader and get that importance? Well, if you go to the term hospitality, it comes from the Greek word philoxenos. And that consists of 2 words, philos and then xenos. Does anybody know what philos means?
No idea.
No idea. Well, I'm from Philadelphia, and if you've ever heard of Philadelphia, you may have heard the term, it's the city of brotherly love. So philos actually is affectionate toward, friendly, to be friendly with, wish someone well. And then xenos, does anyone know what xenos is?
No.
Xenos is foreigners. So if you've ever heard the term xenophobia, that's a fear of foreigners or strangers. So you put the 2 words together, and what philoxenos means is being friendly or affectionate or helpful towards strangers. And that really helps to describe a highly valued Greek and Jewish virtue. If you think about it, to be generous and welcoming to strangers, cordial reception of visitors, guests, strangers, it's to give practical help to anyone in need. And this trait was absolutely necessary for the expansion of the gospel and necessary for the maintenance of the fellowship within the church, as well as the image of the church from without. So we're starting to understand why God placed such a strong importance on being hospitable, philoxenos. Let's talk a little bit more about this. This is actually a growth strategy for your company, for your church. this is the virtuous guest service cycle. And this is what you want to create at your organization. It starts with leadership excellence. You want to have fabulous leaders, and that, like you all in the room, who then create an outstanding team member experience. And you remove the barriers to poor customer service. You have your team members being enthusiastic toward providing great guest service. And so they provide outstanding service. Well, that's a unique experience. People remember that, and they're very loyal to your company. Not only that, but they go out and they come back again and again and then refer your company to others. Say, oh, you can't believe the incredible experience I had. You've got to go experience that. And if you think about Disney, how many people go to Disney and they come back, how was your Disney vacation? Oh, it was amazing. You've got to go to Disney. It's the best place around. Well, what does that create? Organizational growth and success. And when you've got organizational growth and success, that brings new leaders into your organization, the great leaders. And so you can see how this cycle repeats and is very positive. So you have the biblical requirement, you have the growth strategy, and then it allows your members to use their gift of hospitality. We know that that's a spiritual gift, and when you create that environment where people can use it, that allows them to reach their full potential. The next point is that your hospitality can impact an entire nation. There's a story of a young man who was from India, and he was studying in Europe. He was studying actually in London, and he wanted to fully experience everything he could about the culture. So he saw this sign, and it said, revival meeting. He thought, well, I have no idea what this is all about, but I want to go experience it. So he walked for a number of miles outside of London, out to this area. It was basically a tent in a field where they were having the revival meeting. He walked up to the door of the revival meeting, and there was an usher there. And the usher looked him up one side and down and said, your kind aren't welcome here.
Oh no.
And the young man shrugged his shoulders, turned around, and left, and walked back to the city. Well, the young man was Mahatma Gandhi. And you can imagine how, if that usher had welcomed him in and said, well, of course, everyone is welcome here, and let us reflect the love of Christ to you, it could have changed the entire direction of his life and the nation that he ultimately led. And one of the phrases that Gandhi used was, I would have been a Christian if I saw anyone who acted like Jesus Christ. So you just never know who is coming to your door. And so that's why you want to be welcoming of strangers. And to that point, too, you never know who you're serving. I love this verse out of Hebrews 13:2. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Now, that's a pretty amazing thought, that there are angels potentially walking around that are these strangers that you should be welcoming into your organization. So hopefully this gives you a better sense of why this is so important and why we have to always be driving for better hospitality and customer service. So you say, okay, great, Brad, I get it now. I can understand why it's important, but how do I become a great leader in guest service? And the first thing is competence. You have to know what great service is and how to provide it. You have to be always learning about guest service, like you're doing here today. And I tell people, you need to go out and experience it. So what you need to do is go to your boss or go to your board and say, we have to go into the Ritz-Carlton for our next getaway as a management team because we need to go experience great guest service. And you can see how far that takes you, but the idea is go out and experience great service and then take those lessons back to your organization. The second is commitment. you have to look for and remove barriers to employee and guest satisfaction. You know, one of the things when I would do roundtables at Epcot, I'd talk to our hourly cast members, and they would say, you know, I told my boss about this, I told my leader, and he never followed up. She never followed up. A huge element is, do you follow up when your people bring an issue to your attention? And oftentimes you find people don't do that, especially leaders, because they don't manage their time well. So I would submit to you, it's extremely important. I tell everyone the two things that leaders really have to nail are time management, and then one other thing I'll mention in a minute. But if you're not good on prioritizing your time, get this one straight, because it's often viewed by your people as a lack of commitment to them when you don't follow up. The third is characters. Leaders demonstrate humility and service. And if you're in a leadership position, I hope you understand that your role is to serve the people who work for you. It's not to lord over them, it's to serve them. One of the things that I do whenever I answer my phone is I say, Brad Rex, how can I help you? And you should always be asking that question, whether it's to your team members, whether it's to your peers, whether it's to the guests that you see. But putting your employees first is a good example of character, and unfortunately, many leaders these days put themselves first before their people. And then the last, and one of the most important, is compassion. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't know how much you know until they know how much you care. You can be the smartest person out there and the most experienced, everything else, but if people don't believe that you care about them, they're not going to follow you. And a huge element in this is, how approachable are you? Do people feel comfortable coming up to you, telling you the issues that are out there? If no one's coming to you and telling you about issues, it doesn't mean you don't have issues. It means they're just afraid to come tell you about them. So the second thing that I mentioned before, time management. The second thing is active listening. Compassion is really felt by people when you show that you're actively listening to them. That means you listen to what they say, you repeat it back to them to make sure you have understanding, and then you ask for their input on how you solve the issue. So a couple of key questions you should ask yourself and ask people who work for you. Do I trust this leader? Would I work for this leader again? And would I recommend to my friends to work for this leader? Now, if you want to do a real gut check on your leadership, bring your people together, hand out a 3x5 card, okay? Put these 3 questions up on the board and just tell them, just number it 1, 2, 3, and then write yes or no in rating me. So, do you trust me as a leader? Would you work for me again? And would you recommend to your friends to work for me? And if the answer is yes across the board, you're probably doing a great job as a leader. If the answer is no, then you probably have some work to do. So that's a good gut check as a leader. I want to share a story, a couple stories actually, about the impact that you can have as a leader, and particularly as you are a leader of hospitality. I was out walking Epcot one afternoon, and there was a family there, and so I walked up to the family and introduced myself and asked them how they were enjoying Epcot. They said, "Oh, we love Epcot. This is wonderful. We're having a great time." And the daughter said to me, "Do you have any buttons?" And I'm like, "Buttons? We have pins. We have these trading pins, but I don't have any buttons." She goes, "Oh, I collect buttons, and it would just be wonderful if you have any buttons." And so I said, "Well, give me your name and address, and let me see what I can do." So I went backstage, and we had a fabulous manager of guest relations, a lady named Danny Mickler. And I went to Danny. I said, "Danny, I talked to this family out in the park, and they were asking about buttons. Do we have any buttons?" And she goes, "Oh, do I have buttons? And so she goes to her special locker, and of course, people like Danny always have that special locker with everything in it. And she's rustling around in the locker, and so she pulls out this box, and it's got all these buttons of different attraction openings and festivals and events and things. And she said, "Give me your address. I'll take care of it for you." And so I said, "Okay, great, Danny, thank you so much." So I frankly didn't think about it for a little bit. And about a month or so later, I got this nice letter from the family. And it said, you know, how they had enjoyed meeting me, and how the daughter had to get a bigger towel to put all the buttons on, because apparently Danny had sent her a huge box of buttons. And you can see in this picture, the bottom, that's a towel that she had in her room with all these different buttons on it. I wrote them a nice note back, thanked them, of course, for visiting Epcot. Didn't think much more about it. Well, about 2 or 3 years later, I get this call. And it was from the daughter. And she said, "I'm working here at Epcot as a college program student." And I just thought, oh my gosh, you know, the fact that I'd stopped and had this interaction and followed up on it, and now she's a cast member here at Epcot. And then I heard a few years later, she had actually become a guest service manager at Walt Disney World. And so the point of the story is that I could have just walked past that family and not interacted at all. I could have interacted, but not followed up on it. We could have followed up in a small way that wasn't memorable. But through all those different interactions, through that hospitality, through that customer service, it changed the trajectory of this girl's life. So you never know the impact you're going to have on the people around you, and particularly when you stop and show hospitality to a stranger. Let me share one other story, and it has to do with being a great guest service leader. I had just finished speaking at a Disney conference, leadership conference, and a young guest service manager walked up to me. He said, "I'm a guest service manager at Disney today because you gave me a cup of hot chocolate." And I said, I kind of looked at him and said, you wouldn't have remembered it. I was a cast member at Epcot, but he said it was Christmas Eve. The park had closed. We were all walking out, all the cast members, through the cast hallway. And you were there with some of the other executives at Epcot serving us hot chocolate and cookies as we left the park on Christmas Eve. And he said, I knew that you had young kids, and probably the last place you needed to be late at night on Christmas Eve was giving me a cup of hot chocolate and a cookie. And I said to myself then, if that's what a Disney leader does, I want to be a Disney leader. And that's why I'm here today. And once again, I just thought about it and said, my gosh, it was a cup of hot chocolate. And never had any idea of the impact of that service on someone's life. So once again, as you take care of your customers, as you take care of your team members, you can have a huge impact on people's lives. Okay, so we've talked about why it's important. We've talked about how to be a great guest service leader. But the question is, well, what is great guest service? And about 10 years or so ago now, Disney was looking at their guest service scores. And even though they were incredibly high, they were watching those scores declining. And they said, well, this doesn't work. We have got to get to the bottom of this. Why are our guest service scores declining? And so they launched this major project to figure out what is it that we have to do to provide great guest service. And what had happened is there have been so many initiatives, so many different approaches to it, that it had become extremely confusing. And they said, what we've got to do is to get back to the basics. And in fact, that was the name of the project. It was called The Basics. and they interviewed families who had visited. They interviewed cast members, leaders, vendors, everyone you could possibly imagine, to figure out what are the things that we have to consistently do to provide an experience that is outstanding. They came down to 4 things. Now, I've modified a couple of them slightly to fit a more general audience. For example, one of them was stay in character and play the part, but that doesn't quite fit for everyone. But I've distilled it down into these 4 things, and I want to share them with you this afternoon. The first is, know me and make me feel special. Know me and make me feel special. Think about it. You go into McDonald's and you want a cup of coffee. You walk up to the counter. The kid behind the counter says, "What do you want?" You say, "I'd like a cup of coffee, please." "All right, that'll be $1.59. Pick it up at the end of the counter. Pay your money, you go down the way."
Brad, this is
Yes.
Steve.
Yeah.
Could you, I think your hands are moving quite a bit right on your desk, and it's starting to affect your audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll fix that.
Oh, no problem. Just wanted to be sure that you knew that.
Yep. Got it. So, see, I'm very animated when I speak, so you can't see that part of it. But so then you go into Starbucks. And when you go into your Starbucks, they say, "Oh, Bob, so good to see you. Would you like your latte cappuccino with a double soy twist?" And you say, "Oh, yes, that'll be wonderful. That's exactly what I'd like." They knew you, and they made you feel special. Now, how did they do that? Well, you may notice that when you go to Starbucks and you place your order, they ask you for your name. Now, part of that, obviously, is so they can call you when your drink is ready, but it's also so they can get to know you. And if you're a regular at that Starbucks, they get to know your name and what you like to drink. And so now you feel special because they know you. So you want to think about, how can I know my guests and make them feel more special? Because everyone likes to be known and be made special. The second is delight and surprise me. Delight and surprise me. And Disney did a whole program, a year-long celebration around this called the Year of a Million Dreams. What they did was they would actually have the Dream Squad that would go, and there would be guests in line. Then they would come up to the guests, this whole group of people, in the Dream Squad, all dressed up, and they would say, "Everybody in line gets a Mickey Mouse hat," or "Everybody in line gets a fast pass to the attraction." And they would pick out these folks randomly. And of course, the best prize that you could possibly get was one family a day would get selected to spend the night in Cinderella's castle. So when you think about how amazing that is, you return back from your Disney vacation and you say, "You can't imagine. We were just standing there in line and they came up and said, 'We got to spend the night in Cinderella's castle.'" Well, that's how you create an incredible experience that people always remember. And so think about, how can you delight and surprise your customers in a special way? The third is, don't make me wait. Don't make me wait. You call the customer service hotline, you get on the phone, you get the recording. "Your call is very important to us. Your wait time will be 20 minutes from now." And you just say, "Wait a minute, that is not customer service." Now you may say, "Well, Brad, it's kind of funny having a guy from ex-Disney guy tell me don't make me wait," when Disney's known for making you wait in line. But an interesting point is, Disney just spent $1 billion, that's with a B, $1 billion to reduce the wait times in their attractions. It's a program called My Magic Plus. And so they recognize the importance of reducing those wait times and improving the experience. So for your customers, how do you set it up so you don't make them wait? Then the last point is, be positive and happy. Be positive and happy. There was a research study done at Ball State University and Penn State University did. And they wanted to see how the size of the salesperson's smile affected the customer satisfaction. And so they had a person working a point of sale system and checking people out of a store, and they would measure the smile of the person running the terminal, and then they would ask the customer afterwards, how was your interaction? They found a direct correlation. The larger the smile, the more happy the customer was, the more satisfied the customer was. And no matter what the interaction was. And so the finding of it was make sure your people are smiling. But then the question was, well, how do you find people who are positive and happy? And the answer is you hire people who are positive and happy. And a lot of times I would be asked, how do you find all these people at Disney that are always so smiling and happy? We say, we hire for it. We look for that. Southwest Airlines, obviously one of the most successful airlines ever, when they do the interviews, they look for people who are positive and happy. So attempt to hire people who are going to be serving your customers who are positive and happy. But if you do these 4 things, and they sound simple, and yet they're somewhat difficult to do consistently, but if you focus on these 4 things, you will be dramatically better than everyone else out there when it comes to customer service. All right, how can I evaluate guest service? I mentioned in the introduction that this is a way you can evaluate any experience that you have. And you have to look at it in terms of 5 steps. Now, many people will just focus on the experience itself. But actually, the entire experience cycle starts long before the experience. It starts in the anticipation and pre-arrival. Now, a big part of that is your website. People today will go on the websites of companies that they're interested in buying from and see what that website is like. And that creates kind of anticipation pre-arrival. But not only with the website, it's the marketing materials you send out, your ads, TV commercials, however the message gets out about your company. That's all about building anticipation of wanting to use your company. The next point is the welcome. What kind of welcome do you provide to your guests? And once again, you see companies now that are much more cognizant of this. It used to be you'd have the receptionist and oftentimes not smiling, unhappy, not very friendly, kind of the gatekeeper as opposed to the person welcoming you into the organization. Today, you want to have that first experience be very strong, and even to the point of signage and other ways to make people feel welcome. Disney spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on these huge welcome statements as you come onto the property at Walt Disney World. It says, it goes all the way across the road, says, "Welcome to Walt Disney World," with characters on either side and everything else. And then when you arrive at the theme parks, they have background music playing in the parking lots, all part of creating that welcoming experience. Then you have the experience. We talked just a minute ago about the 4 things you need to do to make the experience special. The next part is the farewell. And it was very interesting when we did this exercise at Epcot when I was there. We felt we were doing all the elements pretty well except the farewell. At the end of the night, our guests would just walk out of the park. What we did was to put greeters, put cast members at the exit to the park at night. And as the guests would leave, all they would do is, wave and say, "Thanks for visiting today. We hope you had a great time." And some of them would have Mickey hands on and things like that. But just making a big deal about, "We really appreciated you coming to see us today." I got more letters about that than just about any other thing. We open, huge attractions, everything else. I don't get any letter about the attraction, but I get a letter about, "We couldn't believe the farewell we got the night we visited Epcot." And the other interesting thing was that was the most coveted job that our cast members had. Our cast members, we had to go do a waiting list because cast members wanted to do that job so much because it was so fun for them to talk to the guests at the end of the day and say farewell to them. And then the final point is savoring. You want to try to get something in your customers' hands that they can savor the experience they had with you. At Disney, you see these photographers walking around, Disney photographers, and they're obviously trying to sell you pictures, but one of the other goals is to get a picture of you with your family at Disney that you can take home with you. Because what happens with that? You put it on your desk, you put it in your family room, and you savor the experience that you had. And then when you're trying to decide, well, where should we go for vacation this year? You see that picture and you say, man, we sure had a great time at Disney. Maybe we should go back there. And then, as you can see in the cycle, that builds the anticipation and the cycle starts all over again. So maybe it's an email back to your customers after you've served them. Maybe it's a small gift, a small token, whatever it is, but how can they savor the experience that they had with you? In the same way that you can evaluate your guest experience this way, you should look at your team member experience this way. Are your team members excited to come to work? Are they anticipating coming to work? Are they welcomed when they come in? Does the manager, hey, we're so glad to have you here. We're going to have a great day today. And oftentimes my cast members would tell me, my manager just ignores me when I come in the morning. They don't welcome me. What kind of experience are you creating for your team members? Is it a very positive one? Is it clean break rooms? Is it a nice lunch area, nice areas to get away for a break? Or do you say, well, we're not going to spend any money on that sort of stuff. We're going to put it all in the front of the house. Well, guess what? It's important that you create a great experience for your team members. How about the farewell at the end of the day? Do they just leave? Or do you say, hey, I hope you really had a great day today. And hey, did you have any special experience with anyone today that you want to share? And then the savoring. And so events like team picnics and things like that are very important, and particularly to make sure and take pictures of something like that you can share with your team members, that they kind of savor coming back to work the next day. Realize that all of us are going to spend many more waking hours at work than anywhere else in our lives. And so you want to create a great experience for the people who work for you, because they're the ones who are taking care of your guests on the front lines. All right, so how do I create great guest service? And let me give you some hopefully practical ways that will help you to do this. The first is you have to establish and share your vision for customer service. And in particular, you want to try to make an emotional connection, a higher purpose in describing what your vision is. You want to keep it simple. So, for example, at Hilton, their phrase was, be hospitable. Well, guess what? Everybody can remember that. That's pretty short and sweet. When I was at Hilton Grand Vacations, which is the timeshare division of Hilton, our catchphrase was Hilton Grand Lifetime Fans. We wanted to create owners who were Hilton Grand Lifetime fans. And so you have to have that rallying cry that makes it a common rallying cry that your people can share and talk about. Many people have this long, lengthy vision statement that nobody remembers, nobody focuses on. Keep it short and sweet. And then you've got to repeat that over and over and over again. A lot of leaders think, you know what, I sent out a memo, I talked to them one time, and they're just not getting it. Well, guess what? You have to repeat the same message 7 times before somebody acts upon it. And then you have to repeat it every 28 days. So just about the time you are so tired of sharing a message and you think, I can't believe these people haven't gotten this yet, that's about the 7th time that they have gotten it. And so remember, repeat it over and over again. Secondly, hire people who embody the vision, especially your leaders. If your leaders don't have the vision, there's no way they're going to carry it on to the folks who work for them. And so when you interview, ask people, why they want to work for your company. It's interesting. If you interview at Disney, the most important question they're going to ask you is, why do you want to work for Disney? And you may think, well, that's kind of a softball question. But if you have the person who comes in and says, well, you know, you guys have really good benefits, and I think your stock price is going to be going up, and I don't know, you know, it seems like it's pretty stable. You don't do layoffs very often. As opposed to the person who comes in and says, I remember the first time I saw the castle when I was 10 years old. And I said to myself, if I could ever come back here and share that with other people, that would be the best job in the world. Well, obviously, you're going to hire that second person because they embody the vision. And that type of person doesn't require a whole lot of motivation because they've already got it when they come to work for you. The third is train in technical and soft skills. Many companies just focus on the technical skills required to do a job. But today, you've got to train on the soft skills, the pleases and thank yous and all the different elements that go into that. A lot of times, what we've done is role playing. And you put people in a role-playing situation where it may be difficult with, you know, a difficult guest or a difficult situation, and you teach them how to handle that. That gives them a lot of confidence when they go out on stage and they're doing their jobs. Treat your people the way you want them to treat guests. And, you know, I talked about the team member experience cycle as an element of that. But one of the most important things is the tone that you set as the leader. Has anybody ever asked the question, what mood is the boss in today? Is boss in a good mood today? Is boss in a bad mood? And why are you asking that question? Well, if the boss is in a good mood, guess what? Everybody's in a good mood. And if the boss is in a bad mood, guess what? Everybody's in a bad mood. And there's actually a scientific term for that called emotional contagion, where we pick up the emotions of the people around us, and more specifically, we pick up the emotions of the most senior person around us. And so there were many times that I was driving into Epcot, had a bad day or bad night at home. You know, we had young kids, things like that, and I might have been tired or angry or whatever. And the minute I got through that gate, I had to change my countenance completely. And I had to be positive and happy because I knew that if I wasn't, there was no way my people were going to be that way. And they were certainly not going to reflect that to the guests. Let me give a couple of other quick things on this because it's very important. How you recognize your team members and reward them. We did an effort one time, and my executive team said, Brad, we'd like to try this. And what we want to do is put a red carpet in the cast hallway. And then we're all going to pretend like we're raving fans and that the cast members coming down the red carpet are like being at the Oscars. And we're going to be taking their pictures and asking for autographs. And I'm kind of like, are you kidding me? This sounds really hokey. I mean, I don't know if this is really going to work very well. And just trust me, Brad. Just trust us. We're going to do this. And so we did. We went and got a cheap red carpet. We put it down. All of us got our autograph books and cameras and everything else. And we went out that morning completely unannounced. And as our cast members came down the hallway, we were screaming and yelling, oh, I can't believe you're here. Oh, you know, will you give me your autograph? Oh, I need a picture with you. And we had this one woman I'll never forget. And she kind of was walking down the hallway, kind of started to see what was going on. And then she just stopped and broke down crying. And I thought, you know, what have we done? And my HR manager was next to me. And I'm kind of like, you know, I'm looking at her like, well, what do I do here? And so we walked up to her and we said, you know, we're so sorry if we did something to upset you or offend you. She said, no one has ever done anything like this for me in my entire life. No one has treated me special like this. And you think about this poor person's life and how no one had ever invested in her and told her she was special. And so it's little things like that that have a huge impact on your folks. And let me tell you, if you don't think we provided great guest service that day, because when those cast members went out into the park, they were so pumped up and ready to serve the guests that day. Recognize and reward. Lee Cockrell was the Executive Vice President of Operations for Walt Disney World. So he was the guy in charge of operations for all of Walt Disney World. And he had a famous phrase, recognition is the free fuel that drives your organization. So, you know, you think about gasoline prices and things like that, and you say, how would you like free fuel to drive your organization? Well, that comes from recognizing and rewarding the folks who work for you. And once again, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It can be just a thank you note. When I was at Epcot for my 5 years, we figured out one time, I wrote 5,000 recognition notes to the cast members there. We had 5,000 cast members. And over that 5-year period, I averaged about 1,000 notes that I wrote per year. And that's all in terms of recognizing and rewarding your people because it means so much to them. I didn't realize how important that was until one of our cast members died. And they had a picture of the service. And at the service, framed on the cast member's casket was a letter that I had written to them. So it's small things like that that you think are small that mean an awful lot to your people. Okay. Ask the best question ever. Ask the best question ever. And this is extremely important. So let me give you an example of this. Many of us have gone to a restaurant, and at the end of the meal, the manager comes by, and the manager says, "How was your meal?" And what do you say?
Fine.
Fine. Fine. He walks away thinking he's got a happy customer who's going to be coming back. You walk away saying, I'm not ever coming back to this restaurant again. Because he didn't ask the right question. What he should have followed up with is, what is the one thing we could do better? What is the one thing we can do better? And let's play it out for a minute. He walks up, how was your meal? Fine. What's the one thing we could do better? Well, now that you mention it, my soup was cold. I am so sorry about that. We will make sure and take that off your bill. And, you know, it is not our, we never want to serve cold soup to our customers. I hope that you, when you come back, you will do a better job for you. But I will make sure this is taken off your bill. And then what does the manager do? He goes back in the kitchen and says, why are we serving cold soup? So he gets immediate actionable feedback that he can use to improve customer service. So you can use this question and ask it of your customers, ask it of your team members. What's the one thing I can do better for you as a leader? And if you're really courageous, you can ask this of your spouse. Now, he or she may give you a laundry list of things you can do better. But this is and notice it's not phrased, is there anything we could do better? Because that's overwhelming to people. And I don't want to get into it, you know. What's the one thing? Most people will give you one thing. And the reality is, if they don't, if they say, you know, there was absolutely nothing you could have done better, then you know you've really got a satisfied customer. Okay, we're almost to the end here. A couple more points. Survey to find out how you're doing. You know, Disney was just fanatical about surveying its guests and its team members. and following up on it. So are you doing surveys? And they can just be, like I mentioned before, that a 3-question survey. It doesn't have to be this long, involved process, but you need to be asking the questions. So you could ask those 3 questions about leadership and then add the 4th, what's the one thing we can do better? And that would be an excellent survey that's going to help improve your results. And then the last is fix problem areas. You know, there was, back in the 2008 election, Saturday Night Live had a character, and he basically was kind of representing the public. And his famous phrase was, fix it, just fix it. And that's what your people are telling you. They're saying, here's a problem, you're the leader, you have to fix it. And so fix your problem areas. Don't settle with, oh yeah, I know the computer's slow and I know that's not great, but you know, what do you want me to do about it? No, go out, fix the problem areas. Okay, I mentioned before, how do you deal with an irate customer? And I love this expression by Joel Ross, never underestimate the power of an irate person. It's very, very true that an irate person can absolutely damage your brand today and damage your business. If you think about the internet and all the opportunities to do that through social media, you know, it used to be if somebody was unhappy, they would tell 10 of their friends. Well, now they can tell 1,000. So you've got to make sure that you take care of folks who are not happy with you for whatever reason. The last chance model. The last chance model is an acronym, and the first is listen. Listen. So the person comes to you, they're irate about something that's happened, and the first thing you have to do is just listen. Let them vent. Let them vent all over you. Don't defend yourself. Don't do it. Just let them vent. And then as they vent, we talked before about active listening. So feedback them. So an example I had, I was at guest relations and a family came in and the father goes, I am so mad. We've looked forward all year to coming to the Candlelight Processional, which was a show that we did at Epcot and only did during the holiday season. And he said, your people, it took so long to have dinner that we missed our reservation and we missed the show. And I am so mad at you. And so, you know, I listened, I said, so what you're telling me, sir, is that it took too long for your dinner and you were too late and the show was already going on and you missed the show. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. And so I said, so I repeated it back to him. The next point is to apologize. Sir, I am so sorry that you had this experience, and this is certainly not anything we would want you to have. We want this to be the happiest place on earth, and not to have any issue like this that happens. And I can certainly understand how you were looking forward to this all year. You couldn't, and you weren't able to go to the show. Now, the interesting thing in this story is that it was not the fact, after we followed up, that we took too long for their dinner. It actually ended up that they showed up an hour late for their dinner reservation. And we actually tried to get them through more quickly and even suggested they skip dessert. And they said, no, we're going to have dessert. Well, of course, they missed their show. So it's oftentimes easy to apologize if it's your fault. It's hard to apologize if it was the customer's fault. However, you can always apologize for the way the person feels and say, I'm so sorry you feel this way, even if it's their fault. The third point is solve. And, you know, oftentimes we're fixers. We want to solve the problem. And so we say, well, sir, you know, let me comp your meal and let me do this and let me blah, 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 blah. It's much better to ask the person and say, I'm so sorry this happened. How would you suggest we solve the issue? And oftentimes people are afraid to ask that question because they think the person's going to say, I want my Disney World vacation completely paid and vacations for the next 10 years and blah, 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 all for free. And most people are very reasonable. And once again, I've had situations like this, and the person said, I'd like a Mickey Mouse pencil for my daughter. It's like, yeah, I think we can do that. In this case, the man said, I'd like to come back tomorrow night and have a reservation for the show. And it's like, well, that's easy. We can absolutely arrange that one, you know. And so let the guest solve the problem or put a potential solution on the table. Now, obviously, if it's very unreasonable or whatever, you can say, well, you know, let's talk about this for a minute. You missed your reservation, so we really don't need to pay for your Walt Disney vacations for the next 10 years. But most people will give you a reasonable solution, and you come to resolution. Many companies will do the first 3 steps: listen, apologize, and solve. But the last step is the most important. And this is what changes people from being harsh critics into being raving fans. The T stands for thank. Thank the person for bringing the problem to your attention. So in this case, it was, sir, I am so sorry that this happened, and I just want to thank you for coming in and telling us this, because many people wouldn't take the time to bring this to our attention. And they would just leave and be unhappy and never give us the chance to fix it. And you've not only given us the chance to fix this for your family, but for other families in the future. So you've had an incredible impact here, sir, just by coming and letting us know. And the person walks out and says, oh my gosh, I went and complained and they thanked me for complaining. What an amazing company. And yet it really is true, because you would much rather have that person come and complain to you than to complain to all their friends and say what a horrible experience they had. So follow the last chance model. Listen, apologize, solve, and thank. And then you're going to be providing outstanding service and changing those folks from those critics into fans. At this point, and if someone wants to give me a time check, I have 10 after the hour. How are we on time?
I'm getting a 5-minute signal.
Perfect. Okay. So we have 2 options here. One is I can answer questions for the 5 minutes, or I can show you a video that kind of wraps a lot of these pieces together. So is there, I guess I could ask, are there any immediate questions anyone has?
Stand by. Anybody would like to ask some immediate questions?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. Okay. So, Brad, I think the questions are on the tip of tongues.
Perfect.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to send my video, my laptop around to different folks so that you can actually see them as they talk to you. And Anton, go ahead.
Hi, Brad. Thank you for.
Hang on one second.
Yeah, but that's okay. He can hear from here, I think. So
Can you hear me, Brad?
Yes, let me just pop in so I can see you. There we go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Hi.
Thank you so much for presenting to us. It's been marvelous, really insightful. Thank you so much. I have one question. You mentioned something that I never saw in this way, and you mentioned the whole thing about anticipation in that cycle, and you said that the website is part of creating the anticipation for people coming in. Are there more ways? In what ways have you seen as being the best to create anticipation without over-promising and then in the end under-delivering? Do you have any comments on that?
Well, again, it all kind of fits together. So it's your website, it may be your TV advertising, any marketing collateral you put out, emails that you may send out, in advance. So, let's say you're having a meeting with someone and they're coming to your office or whatever, and you give them we're very excited that you're taking the time to come see us. Let me give you, directions to our office. Here's who you're going to meet, things like that, and really, kind of build it up as they're anticipating coming. But oftentimes, what you find is either there's no build up and no kind of information, and so the person doesn't know what to expect, or it's very terse or generic. Make it, once again, know me, make me feel special. Use the person's name if you can, and really try to make it personalized as much as possible, so that they're anticipating that, looking forward to it. But if you go on DisneyWorld.com and just take a look at that website, I think you'll be blown away by what they're trying to do in that site is to emotionally engage with you and get you emotionally engaged. So here's an interesting thing. I would go and review other companies, and let's say another company theme park. They would put pictures of their attractions and their shows on their website, okay? And so you'd say the biggest roller coaster, or this fabulous show, blah, blah, blah. What Disney would do is put pictures of people experiencing the attraction. All right? And you'd see the smiling, happy faces of the people while they're doing the attraction. Now, that's completely different. And that builds anticipation. It's like, well, if I'm on that attraction, I'm going to have fun. It's not just showing this metal object. So look at all the material that you send out with a very critical eye. Is this going to get people excited about coming to see me and excited about doing business with my company? Because that's how you want to build the anticipation.
Thank you.
All right, Brad, we got another one. Another
Yeah.
question over here.
Great. Perfect.
Hi, Brad. I'm Henny. Thank you for an incredible presentation. You started off by saying there's two attributes of leaders that's important or paramount. The one was time management,
Right.
and perhaps I missed the second one, but you didn't point that out, or I didn't pick it up.
It's active listening. Active listening.
Which you are doing.
I'm glad someone else said that besides me, but no. No, but the whole idea here is that people feel like you're listening to them.
They say that.
And once again, I would see interactions between a manager and a cast member. And the interesting thing was, I'd see the one manager, the cast members talking to him, and you could see the manager was completely focused on what the person was saying. And actually, the key thing is they would bring out their notebook and write it down. And that's really sending a signal to the person, I'm not only listening to you, I'm writing down what you have to say. Now, I'd see other managers that would be there, and you could tell, they're looking around, they've got their radio, they're, doing anything but listening, and they're not writing down. And I could predict when that cast member walked away, they said, my manager was not listening to me. And when you get that reputation, it's like people don't bother to talk to you anymore. And then you never know what's going on in the organization. This was a skill I really worked hard on developing because it was so important. And I would create touch points in the organization. There would be frontline cast members that I would develop relationships with that would tell me what's going on in the organization. So it'd be kind of funny. There may be someone from one of our restaurants, and she would call me up and say, Brad, the front of the house, the back of the house aren't getting along very well here, and we've got some issues. And so I'd go to my food and beverage general manager and I'd say, do we have any issues at Le Cellier? And he'd be like, no, everything's great there, no problem at all. And say, you might want to go check that out and just see what's going on there. And pretty soon he'd come back and say, yeah, we've got a front of the house, back of the house issue there, Brad. How did you know? And it was because I developed the relationships and did the active listening.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Do we have time? What's the feeling?
Okay, hold on a second.
Yep.
Hi, Brad.
Hi.
My name's Harry. I just got a question. I come from a sales and marketing background, but I'm working for the church currently. And one of the things that I've picked up is just in general with our current economic climate, where we are, guys are spending money on very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very basic needs first before they look at spending money on marketing or spending money on look and feel. They'd rather employ a PA to manage a secretary, not necessarily just bearing on the church, but just in the general trend where we are in South Africa. So people are spending money on, I'd rather get another person to bring me more money in or whatever. And the look and feel is not necessarily, or a customer relations officer, or depending on the size of your business, you're going to go, I'd much rather get another consultant in than get another, or get a customer relations officer in or something like that. Is there a cheap way of doing this so that I can at least start with this? Because I say my budget just cannot get someone on top of in terms of looking at my customer experience. Or are you saying, well, you should really be looking at this and rather retrenching some of the people that you have and then look at putting in customer relations, because that's where you're going to score a lot. So I want to find that balance in terms of what you're saying.
Well, I just want to make sure I understand the question, because it sounds a little bit like you're saying, hiring someone to do customer relations. Is that?
Sorry, Brad, you broke up there.
I'm sorry. It sounds to me like you're saying that about hiring someone to do customer relations for you. Is that what I'm hearing? Or
well, always part of someone's existing job or something, but saying how much of an importance is that? Where should I be cutting, and should I be cutting and saying rather spend time and focus on that? Or where's the balance in terms of the line of saying, but I see there's a much bigger need in terms of the economic climate where people are cutting on marketing and customer relations and that thing, and rather saying to people focus on business-specific needs right now, core business needs, and spending time on that. So then they're saying, the first thing they'll cut on is a customer relations or for instance, I've seen that in a few businesses that I've had to deal with. That's the first place they cut. And I'm asking, where's that line? Are you making sort of a direct contrasting statement to what people are generally doing right now in terms of saying, well, that's the first place I'm cutting, or that's the last place I will be investing?
Well, let me share a story about that. One of my peers at Disney went to work for United Airlines, and United Airlines wanted a Disney person to come in to improve their customer service, okay, which was at that time horrible. And when they hit hard times, they fired this person, okay?
Sorry, Brad, we just missed you there again.
When they hit hard times, when United went through hard times, they fired the person they had hired for customer relations, okay, from Disney, that was there to put everything in place. Their service now is even worse than it was before, and United has struggled as an organization. Now contrast that with a company like Southwest that I mentioned earlier. So Southwest Airlines has had 40 years of consecutive increases in earnings. And they will tell you one of their key success factors is their customer service. So, what you want to do is create that virtuous cycle, because if you create the downward cycle of bad leadership, bad team member experience, bad customer experience, then you lose your customers, you lose referrals, and you have a downward spiral that will end your company. So there's a number of other factors, and I can actually send this on, of numeric quantification of customer service and the impact that it has on a company's results. But there's a clear correlation. If you spend money on customer service, you will improve your company's results.
Yeah, I think it's, and I don't speak for everybody, I know, but like I said, there's a large amount of people that we do get involved with, or I used to get involved with, that does not recognize it as business critical.
Well, they're making a big mistake.
Well, That's what I'm just thinking, and it's great to hear you speak on this. And from where you are speaking, you've got statistics to back it. So I think that's important when you are dealing, especially with a lot of guys who's maybe in consulting. Because if you bring these things up, it's usually the first thing the guys ask is, well, is that really business critical? And I think that's really great to just hear, but well, here's some evidence on that, and that's something you should really be spending money on. So,
Yep.
Cool.
All right. Well, anyway, let me just hit the last concluding slide here, and then we'll call it a wrap. So the conclusion is, you as a leader set the level of guest service in your organization. And once again, a famous phrase by Lee Cockrell, he said, if you have flies in your kitchen, it's because you want to have flies in your kitchen. If you have bad guest service, it's because you want to have bad guest service, because you're the one who sets the tone. You want to create that virtuous guest service cycle that we talked about. You want to evaluate your operation using both the guest experience and the team member experience cycles to see how you're doing on providing that special experience. Improve your service with a specific plan. Say, what are the things we've got to do and what priority? Ask that key question. Anybody remember the key question? The best question ever?
What is that one thing?
What's the one thing we can do better? Ask that question and then follow up on it. Convert your harsh critics into raving fans using that last chance model, and then repeat. Consistency is critically important. And once again, this is not something you do once. It's something you have to continuously do, continuously improve on, especially as your people turn over and as guest expectations change. But it is a very hard task, and yet I would tell you, if anyone serves, he should do it with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. We're providing this service not for our business, not to grow our bottom line necessarily, but because we are called to do it as Christian leaders in the marketplace. So thank you so much for having me today, and you guys are awesome. I look forward to continuing our conversation, and if I can do anything to help you, we are going to give you the notes. I can also send a couple of other slides on that have some of the quantification factors of why guest service is so important. So I'll send that on as well to follow up on that one question.
Yeah. Well, my friend, thank you. It's obviously great to see you so far away, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll see you up close. And thank you so much for obviously sharing your insights on customer service and guest relations. Really appreciate you, man. And we will just wish for nothing but the best for you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.